Okay, grade seven. So, in the dialogue activity that I've asked you guys to do, I've been noticing some consistent errors along the way, and I really wanted to address some of those errors and talk about why it's so important for us as writers to recognize the proper way of doing things. So, to begin with, when we're looking at dialogue, dialogue is communication within a novel or short story designed to convey ideas or thoughts or opinions between two or more characters. And the challenge that you face if you're not doing dialogue properly is that the reader tends to get confused about who or what is being expressed. If you're not being really, really clear about your shifts between speakers in dialogue, then it becomes really easy to become confused and not be sure who or what is going on, who is speaking or what is going on, who's actually thinking things, who's actually trying to express their ideas. And if you're not sure of that, then later on in the story, it's possible that um, you will mistake values or ideas or thoughts that one character expressed for what another character expressed, and so you'll be confused about why characters are doing things, the motivation, the basic makeup. And so having very clear dialogue in narratives becomes absolutely critical. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to create a new dialogue activity. I'm going to walk through it with you. I'm just going to be writing this as we go so you can sort of see how I go about writing dialogue. Now, I've done a lot of dialogue writing in my life. Um, as you guys know, I've written several books. All of those books have got lots of dialogue. And so understanding how to write dialogue was a fundamental thing for me. I needed to be able to do it, and I needed to be able to do it well. And so I really want you guys to benefit from that experience, that knowledge that I have. So when you're starting your dialogue, what you really want to do is set the stage, provide the viewer or the reader with a sense of what's actually happening. And always, when you're doing narrative dialogue, when you're doing any kind of narrative writing, you indent for every new speaker, for every new idea. Again, like all good writing, you have to separate your ideas clearly. So we're going to start a new paragraph. We're going to indent or tab in. So what I've done here is I've established that the character who is going to be speaking or the character who we're going to be talking about has set himself in a place and situation. So the day dawned slowly, light creeping along the horizon as John McNeill rose from his travel bed and rubbed his eyes. Now, this is one of the characters from The Circle of Silver, which is one of the novels that your class is reading. So this character, um, I'm going to try and establish a couple of things with what he's saying and look at a couple of things that he may or may not be experiencing. Okay. So, uh, next step, you want to establish who he's going to be speaking to. So these become really important. Having a clear indicator of who your characters are, who is speaking to whom, and why. All right. So John McNeill rose from his travel bed and rubbed his eyes. He glanced over at Marie, who was already busy at the fire. So the next thing, really important, you don't need to have a new speaker line here because we've indicated this is John McNeil. And so since he is the subject of this paragraph, you don't have to change who's speaking, so you don't need to change the paragraph structure. So you can keep the fact that he's speaking in this paragraph, and it becomes clear to the reader that it's John who is speaking. The next thing you need to indicate is inside of the quotes, this comma, because this section here, he muttered gruffly, is what makes this good morning a complete sentence. So good morning doesn't stand alone in dialogue. It does stand alone in normal speech. We can say just good morning, but in dialogue, we need to add enough material to make it a complete sentence. So, good morning, comma, he muttered gruffly, period. Watch the punctuation. This is one of the things that I've noticed in most of your dialogues so far, is that you tend to mistake the punctuation in your writing. You tend to either put the commas on the outside of quotation marks, which is a no-no, or you'll put a period here and then capitalize this, which isn't necessary, or you won't have any punctuation in here at all. And again, you need to have the punctuation inside the quotations. You have to have some kind of punctuation inside that quotation. It's a must in dialogue writing. Okay. Now, if it is a period, then this needs to be capitalized, but you don't need it because this is a dependent clause, comma connecting. Okay. So the next thing you need to do is make sure that you go to a new paragraph because the new speaker is going to start speaking, and you need to clearly show the reader that someone else has started talking, or at least we've changed focus. They might not speak, but we've changed focus to the other character. So okay, so Marie looked up from the embers. So what we've done is we've established who the new subject of this sentence is. It's now Marie. We've established where and what she's doing, but she's already busy at the fire. It is, she agreed. Now, again, using a verb here instead of just said or she replied, you want to try and vary up the verbs you use. You want to try and make sure that you're using more than just one or two, and you want to try and adjust how you organize your sentence structure, because the more ways you organize your sentence structures, the more interesting your writing becomes. If you always have the same structure, it becomes really dry or boring, and it will take away from the actual writing. Now, I'm going to show you an example of that, and you'll see why it becomes ineffective. So, Marie looked up from the embers. It is, she agreed. Bending, she blew on the remains of the fire. Now, I'm going to show you again in this section next what to avoid doing. Even if you start with quotation marks, which you're supposed to, and a capital, which you must. Okay, so if you don't have some kind of commentary with your dialogue, it starts to get really confused. How are you? I'm fine. That's good. Yes, it is. How are you? I'm okay. Good. Who's saying what? How are they saying it? Are they just sitting there like robots, back and forth? How are you? I am fine. That's good. Yes, it. Right? You need to really adjust how you're doing this and try to vary up your structure. Now, again, if you're always starting with the quotes and simple sentences, it's going to get boring. All right. Now I'm going to show you how even using the same, like even using a descriptor, uh, oh, even when we add who's speaking, yes, it clears up who is saying what, but it doesn't make it any better. Okay. How are you? John said. I am fine, Mary said. That's good, John said. Yes, it is. How are you? Marie said. I'm okay, John said. Good, Marie said. Do you see how it becomes monotonous and repetitive and ineffective? So the first thing you can do is you can change the verb. You can start by saying, you know what? Said's dead. Don't use said. Don't use it. There's no point to it. If you use it once in a dialogue, that's more than enough. Most of the time, you want to use more vivid verbs or you want to use actions rather than actual descriptors. So, how are you? John yawned. Does that give you a clearer understanding of how he said something? How are you? Dang it. It actually made me yawn. Okay, so how are you? John yawned. I'm fine, Marie said. Now, again, if you don't want just said, you could say smiled. I am fine, Marie smiled. Okay. Now, even so, even looking at this, we're still using the same sentence structure. So, what if instead of that, you took this and you moved it to the start? You still use the same stuff, but now you've got some change in structure. And so it's going to make it move better. It's going to make it easier for the reader because they won't get stuck in the same rut, seeing the same stuff over and over and over again. Now, Marie smiled, comma here, because you are going to be adding content. So Marie smiled, comma, I am fine. That's good, so John said. Now, realistically speaking, does this sound like actual dialogue that two kids would be using with each other? It's a little stilted, is the word. It doesn't sound natural. Because usually, how are you? I'm fine. Um, you wouldn't have, that's good. Yes, it is. That doesn't sound natural. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to make one dialogue, one speaker, have a little bit more complex speech. So we're going to get rid of all of this. Marie smiled. I am fine. We're going to say now what she continues to do. I am fine. Marie smiled. I am fine. She flew into the ashes again, and a small blaze lit the tinder. How are you? Hey, "Oh, good morning," he muttered gruffly. Marie looked up from the embers. "It is," she agreed. Bending, she blew on the remains of the fire. "How are you?" John yawned. Marie smiled. "I'm fine." She blew into the ashes again, and a small blaze lit the tinder. "How are you, John?" And you know what? I'm going to get rid of "How are you, John?" I'm going to change that to "Did you well?" And now, what would you add next? Because it's been an inquisitive. It's an inquiry. She's asking a question. You need to make sure you use a question mark there. Okay. Now you'll notice here I've used a period because this is a complete sentence. She smiled. I am fine. You need a space and the capital letter there. So we've now added dialogue, we've added action, we've transformed things from a very robotic, very pretend or fake discussion into something a little bit more realistic. Now we're going to move on. So, how would you respond if somebody asked, "Did you sleep well?" Well, you know what? I'd probably nod. John nodded and moved over to crouch beside her. Okay. He's not sitting down, he's not standing up, he's crouching. Okay. Because obviously she's bending to blow on the fire. Um, so here we've now moved the plot forward with this. Yes, he's responding. John nodded. Did you sleep well? John nodded. It was cold, but okay. But now we're moving the story forward. We're actively engaged in making an action next. Should I get you more wood? Okay. Now, do you have to indicate that he questions or he asked? No. The question mark does that. You've already established what he's doing, how he's doing it. He's looking longingly at the tiny flame. He's responded, but now he's asking what he should do. Okay. Now, how would she respond to something like that? So, you can then choose what kind of action you want her to have or what you want her to tell John to do, anything like that. But again, you're going to notice that you establish what she's doing. Smiling, she motioned to the empty space where Samuel had been. "My brother has already gone for some. Go wash. We will have breakfast soon." So, do you need to add anything like she said? No. You could, but if you're going to say "she said" or "she insisted," then you could probably get rid of this prefatory information. If you've got this stuff in advance, don't have it after. Okay? So, generally speaking, the more you adjust or arrange your sentence structures and change things up, the more interesting the writing becomes. Make sure you're paying attention to the use of capitals, at the ends of sentences. So if you've got a period here, you need to have a capital inside the quote. If you have a comma, you need to not have a capital inside the quote unless it's a proper noun. I. Okay. If you're done speaking, you need to have a period. If you want to provide expression about how they're speaking, you need to have a comma. So these are some of the very basic rules of dialogue, but most important, you're going to notice every single time someone new starts, you indent. You have a new paragraph for a new speaker. Okay, I'm going to have this as just the quick little mini lesson on dialogue. I'm going to put it on the stream for you guys to see today. All right, over and out. Back to you, grade 7.